Okay, a very good afternoon to all of you. It is our great pleasure to welcome you here at Tyndall, and with this kind of, first of this kind of IERC event. So I think most of you know that we do annual conferences, but this is our first event, and it's a very new initiative which we have taken. This initiative is basically, we have started kind of a blockchain in energy event series. And that blockchain in energy event series, we are going to host, like, maybe at some frequent interval, we'll have 3 or 4 in a year. And it will be focused on blockchain technology, how we can apply blockchain technology in the energy sector. We'll be bringing international, national experts, talking about this technology and learning from each other. So that's our new initiative. For this first blockchain in energy initiative, because we have this our EnerPort project, so we thought to introduce how this EnerPort project, how it is running, what is peer-to-peer energy trading, and what has been the progress so far. So we'll have a number of presentations today, and basically we are going to cover technology side of the blockchain. We are going to cover the software side, basically how blockchain data transaction and those kind of things. And then we'll have one on the policy and regulatory side. And then we'll have a regulatory, this very lively panel discussion where we'll talk about how Irish businesses, what are the opportunities in the blockchain and energy space and how they can get into this, what are the potential opportunities, what are the risks, and how they should look into this area. So that's the agenda. Before going into this, we'll have a very brief introduction about the IERC. Most of you know, but we are just going to talk about how, what are the key projects and how IERC has grown at this level. So a brief story we'll talk about. And just before going into this presentation mode, there are 4 very important announcements. In case of fire emergency, the way you came in, you need to go out in the same way, just follow the crowd, just beside the Tyndall building. There is a area where you can, there is a space where we all can collect, we hope nothing will happen, but just in case of emergency. And yeah, we are going to take like 2 to 2.5 hours, like 2.5 hours or something, but there is coffee, tea, and biscuits, cookies, everything will be there until the end. So feel free, go and take your coffee, tea, and everything, and then again come back. Toilets are just outside the door. Take right and take again right. So 2 right, okay? So there are male and female toilets outside there. And the last thing is everything is recording here. So we are on YouTube live. So just to tell you that everything is recording, and so it's on live. I think few people are already online. And after this presentation, definitely this will be available on, you can have a look on the video later on as well. So that's all from me. And to make an introduction to what the IERC, what we are doing here, I would like to introduce Dr. Beth Massey. Dr. Beth Massey is the head of research for the IERC. She holds an MSc in computer science, software engineering, and mathematics from the Florida Institute of Technology, USA. And she has a PhD in medical image processing from the University of Lincoln, UK. She has significant experience in project management, having completed and delivered on large programs for the US Department of Defense, JAPA, and NASA. She is especially interested in developing technology enablers that drive innovation for solving society's grand challenges, providing education and options for enhanced quality of life. I would like to invite Dr. Beth Massey for introduction to the IERC.
Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm gonna hold this like this. If you feel like I'm screaming at you, hold your hand up and I'll stop. So it's nice to see so many faces again. I just echo Piyush's welcome to you, and in my own American way, can I just say Happy Thanksgiving? That's what today is. So there are quite a few familiar faces, and thank you to those of you who have supported us all along. For the newest of you in the audience, I just want to say a few words about the IERC. So the IERC was started in 2012, there were 2 of us. So I say us, but it was really Tony Day, our executive director, and his admin at the time, May Begin, supported by the Department of Energy at the time and the Department of Jobs. Since then, we've grown to 15 people as an in-house core team, but we also have 53 researchers working with the IERC in a distributed way with 6 national academic institutions. We are also doing work through our Horizon 2020 projects with 67 partners worldwide from 26 different countries. So we have work on Horizon projects that include building energy performance and also business models, but also we work with the International Energy Agency as well. And we have about 20 international partners on that project. So we're in 3 broad areas. Those areas are low carbon heating and cooling, energy efficiency and analytics, and embedded generation and distributed systems. And we have a 5-lens research model. So of course, as researchers, we're always interested in the technology, but what we also want to look at are things like the business models, the policy and regulation, user behavior, and also information and intelligence. So that's where the data comes in. And as a computer scientist, I tend to think about that this is my favorite part of the projects. But as we've seen now with topics like blockchain, it is all about the data. And as the energy sector grows, and we learn more about what we don't know, what we find out about what we don't know is through the data. So we'd like to think of ourselves as working on not just the innovations of today, but also as future leaders for tomorrow. So thought leaders in disruptive areas like blockchain. And if I could just say a little bit of history, most of you probably know this. Blockchain was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. And in 2015, Terry Madigan with SystemLink came to our conference and spoke to us about blockchain. And at the time, I had never heard of blockchain, and I thought Terry was just a little bit mad. But since that time, now in 2018, about every day, something comes across my desk related to blockchain. It might be an article in a paper, it might be an email that somebody's working on, it might be a fund that SCAI is putting out for all text for people to write into, to do some work on blockchain and blockchain policy. So we know that this is now pervading all areas of our lives, and especially in the energy sector. And while blockchain has really been part of the financial and banking sector for a long time, it's now come to the energy sector. And we know this because just recently, PricewaterhouseCoopers have put out a survey. They find that 84% of companies in the world are doing some sort of dabbling in blockchain. So it's no longer just a buzzword. So for us at the IERC, we see the overarching benefits of a technology like blockchain to provide us an enabler to do such things as price transparency in the markets. And when I say markets, I mean current markets, but also new markets. So there's going to be new markets in terms of grid services, in terms of clean energy, in terms of local energy generation, and big energy. Blockchain can provide us with a coordinating layer that allows these various revenue streams to work together rather than working against each other. So we're looking forward to that. In order for there to be then true collaboration and what we now know as sector coupling, we need to embrace these disruptors like blockchain. And we need to think about them in terms of not just what we do today, but in our future strategies. So tonight we're going to show you some work that the IERC has been working on, a project that we're really proud of. And we're going to be looking at how these disruptors can help us in the future. So thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the evening and the event. Thank you so much. Yep. Okay, so it turns out that I'm the facilitator now, so, which is good because I like being in control. So I'm going to introduce the speakers and then also try to keep the speakers to time, if you don't mind. So our first speaker up is Morgan Slattery. So Morgan is a member of the, oh, sorry, let me do this. I need to do this more, you know. Okay. is a member of the Shareholding and Financial Advisory Division of the Department of Finance. As part of his role, he co-chairs the department's Blockchain and Virtual Currencies Working Group and is a co-author of the department's discussion paper on virtual currencies and blockchain technology. Prior to joining the Department of Finance 2 years ago, Morgan worked as a senior corporate finance specialist in the UK financial services sector. That's it. So, thank you, Morgan.
Thank you very much. I've never been on a YouTube live before, so I need to be careful what I say. So yeah, thank you very much for having me down to the court to talk about the working group and some of the things we're doing in the Department of Finance. I just asked me to give a quick overview of Blockchain 101, just so we can set the stage for some of the discussions that will be happening later on. And then I'll dip in a bit more detail as to what the Department of Finance are doing. Great. And I'll dip into just some of the work the Department of Finance are doing in relation to virtual currencies and blockchain technology, and then just talk a little bit about the wider blockchain ecosystem, some of the companies that are innovating in Ireland, and as well as some of the research stuff that's happening. But just before I kick off, just a show of hands, perhaps, who here has a fairly good understanding of blockchain technology and how it works? Okay, good. Okay, well, I'm just going to start off really basic, just about how it works. So really, blockchain technology is a subset of a wider group of technologies known as distributed ledger technologies. And I really focus on those two words, distributed and ledger. Ledger is something I think people will be much more familiar with. They've been literally around for millennia. The first ledger is being used to record the amount of grain and wheat required in beer. But over time, ledgers have evolved in complexity, and eventually we moved towards something more sophisticated, the likes of the double entry bookkeeping system, which ultimately grew in towards what we more recognize today as spreadsheets. What's different about a distributed ledger to really the first five ledgers is that it's decentralized. So with the first five ledgers, these are a centralized place where you go to record details of transaction, time the transactions took place, and the information that's been recorded, who paid whom. But a distributed ledger, really what it's about is that everyone in a given network has the opportunity to have a copy of that ledger. So if we were to set up, for example, a distributed ledger in this room, everybody would gain a copy, and let's say if I was to pass around €20 to every individual, every time that €20 exchanged hands between the individuals in the room, simultaneously everyone's copy of that ledger will be updated. And that's really important for a number of reasons. One, security. If someone tries to hack in and change my version of the distributed ledger, you will all have copies of the distributed ledger that disagree with mine. I'll misalign with the general ledger, and I'll be kicked out of the network, essentially. The second important aspect is that you can get a much greater degree of decentralization. So it allows you to transact on a peer-to-peer basis, and you're not reliant on a centralized trusted source like a bank or a clearinghouse or a centralized institution, which we normally do. And by removing those centralized institutions, you're able to reduce the costs and transaction costs that are associated with transferring money or transferring value in other ways. So just this is a picture from MIT. It's essentially a graphic interpretation of what a blockchain might look like. So here you've got the second block. It's akin to essentially a page in a paper-based ledger. You've got a list of all the transactions that have taken place between the parties within that blockchain. So you can see there, Bishop pays Burke $82. And then all the information within that distributed ledger, within that ledger is then cryptographically hashed down the bottom here, and that is then used to reference the next block that's formed with the next round of transactions. So what you get over time is a blockchain of transactions that take place. So the interesting thing about blockchains was it was mentioned earlier that the first iteration of blockchain, or the first manifestation of a blockchain, was through Bitcoin. And that really proved that you could have a peer-to-peer network that allowed for the transfer of value between participants within the blockchain network. But really, it doesn't just have to be Bitcoins that can be recorded in the ledger and transferred in the ledger. It can be euros, pounds, or dollars. Or in the case of EnerPort, you can record units of electricity that households generate and record in the ledger so that you can transfer those units from house to house. So, Neutral experts in blockchain, I just wanted to go through one or two examples. I think one of the easiest examples to understand, if you have any knowledge of cryptocurrencies, is around the payment sector. So Circle is, if anyone's aware of it, they're an Irish headquartered company, valued at about 3 billion last time I checked. They've got a mostly American board. They are based here. And it's essentially a peer-to-peer payments network. So it's pretty much the WhatsApp for payments. You can pay people in US dollars, euros or pounds, anywhere in the world instantly. And what you can see there is you're cutting out all the institutions that are normally associated with the payments. So your retail bank, your international clearing institutions. And it means people can transfer value for free anywhere really in the world to someone who has the app. So I just thought I'd move on and talk a little bit about the blockchain working group came about. So myself and my colleague, Mai Santa Maria, who's here, who's my manager and also sits on the blockchain working group and co-chairs it with myself. And we've been researching this area for about a year, and really we were quite brought into it by the fact that the number and value of virtual currencies that were in existence last year was starting to get larger and larger. I think at one stage it was, as you can see here, about 600 billion in December last year. So from a consumer risk and from an investor protection risk, it started to make more and more sense that the Department of Finance should start to be involved and start to understand some of the risks pertaining to blockchain technology, but also to look at some of the opportunities that the technology presented. So we went along to an event called the Blockchain for Finance event in October of last year. We started to see more and more large financial services companies who are exploring this technology as a way to reduce the transaction times, the transaction costs that were associated with the more traditional financial services transactions. So Credit Suisse, for example, where it was one of the use cases we heard about, and they normally took, I think, about 21 days to write a syndicated loan, so a large loan to big corporates. So 21 days to write that loan for the customer. Involved faxes, telephone calls, emails, and by just employing a distributed ledger, which allowed them to share information with all the people involved in the transaction, they're able to reduce the transaction time to about 3 days. So a massive saving for them as a company, and a much better service, obviously, for their customers. So we knew there was an economic potential to investigating blockchain technology and seeing and having Ireland as a location of choice for blockchain type companies. So really the working group was broken up into 3 steps. First of all, we wanted to provide clarity to businesses, consumers and investors. And really our thinking was if we provide a clearer operating environment, it will make it far more conducive and far more attractive to businesses to operate within the Irish economy. Secondly, we wanted to really build out the Irish ecosystem and reach out to companies and research centres that were involved in the blockchain space to get a better understanding of what people were doing. And lastly, we wanted to start engaging at a European level because Ireland hadn't really been up to speed yet on the technology and some of its implications. So we spend a lot of time now speaking with regulators at the European level to understand some of the implications and legislations around virtual currencies, but also taking part in some of the EU initiatives around blockchain technology. So just to give you an overview of some of the initiatives we've partaken in. The first step was to release a discussion paper back in March, just around the same time as the announcement of the working group. That was back March 22nd. And that was to really signify to the market that the Irish Department of Finance and the state was looking into blockchain, that was interested in the technology. Secondly, we wanted to address some of the consumer risks that would normally be associated with virtual currencies. We knew there were a lot of Irish investors that were where we're buying and selling cryptocurrencies. So we wanted to put out warnings around the risks pertaining to it. We put all the warnings up on the department website, just so there's a single source of information. And then really want to provide a bit more clarity around the tax situation. So we published a notice on value-added tax, and subsequently the revenue commissioners came out with some guidance on corporation tax, income tax, and capital gains tax. So within the space of a number of months, there was far more clarity really in terms of the operating environment for businesses and investors. And the next step, as I mentioned earlier, was to really try and look outward from the department, look outward from the state, and try and engage a bit more the blockchain ecosystem, and trying to see what companies and research centres were doing with this technology. So we didn't really have to look far. The IDA is actually extremely active in the space, and they have been for about 2 or 3 years. They've been engaging on a very regular basis, every 4 to 6 weeks, experts within the blockchain space. So they've got a monthly meeting, which was called the Irish Blockchain Experts Group, and that was a way of coordinating all the players within the Irish industry and trying to work ideas out about how we could grow the ecosystem and grow the business community here. And so when the Department of Finance came in, we worked with the IDA, Enterprise Ireland, and some of the industry players to launch the central brand, which is Blockchain Ireland. So it's an opportunity to share information with individuals and businesses that are interested in learning more about the blockchain ecosystem here in Ireland. So if you get a chance, it's worthwhile looking into. And out of that as well, was launched the Women Blockchain Initiative, which Mai partakes in. So that was just another way to ensure that there's as many people included in the ecosystem as possible. So just to give you an idea of some of the companies that actually exist in the Irish ecosystem, and I made up this graph for the last couple of weeks. And one of the things I'm more surprised by is just the breadth of different industries which blockchain is going into. You've got compliance, smart contracts, travel. Many of you may have heard of Aid Tech, who use blockchain technology to distribute aid to Syrian refugees in Lebanon. You've NUIG Coffee, which is a personal favourite of mine. They actually track the supply chain of coffee using blockchain, and it allows you as a consumer to get a really unparalleled level of transparency around the supply chain of coffee, and you can actually see how much the farmer was paid and where the value is added over the supply chain. So they call it fair chain coffee as opposed to fair trade coffee. So and just some of the other companies that are working on Gecko Governance. They recently raised about $1 million in investment, and they're improving the quality of regulatory reporting using blockchain technology. So, as we know, blockchain is very good for sharing information that you can pool all the information together and then share it with the regulator. Blockchain is actually a very powerful tool for doing that. Lastly, another obviously a very important aspect of the blockchain ecosystems, the research centres, because they feed in a lot with the various different companies that I mentioned in the previous slide. Nimbus Centre, who we're representative here from today, they launched their own peer-to-peer blockchain research in October 2017 called Smart Blocks. They also work with an Irish startup called Zito to improve the lifespan of food within supermarkets. CEDAR have been doing some testing of the various different types of blockchain, Ethereum, Tendermint, Hyperledger, IERC, so I look forward to hearing more about their project now. And the Adapt Centre recently launched a €5 million research programme, which will invest in fintech companies and blockchain providers. So there's just an incredible ecosystem. I think there's just so much energy around this technology, and because there's so much excitement in it, you have young, innovative companies teaming up with research centres, and even which you would normally see in other industries, you're getting the large players like the IBMs, Microsoft, willing to work with smaller companies to grow the ecosystem and to grow the technology. So I'm just going to finish off with a quick quote, because I think it sums up blockchain technology quite well and its potential for Mark Carney, the Government Bank of England. Our economies are reorganising to series distributed peer-to-peer connections across powerful networks, revolutionizing how people consume, work, and communicate. I think we think of Airbnb, Uber, and now blockchain technology. I think that's a very true statement. So I'll pass you back to.
No, just yet, because you might have a question. Yeah. So we've got time probably for one question, if there's a burning question in the audience. He's here, he's got a target on his phone. Renee, go ahead. Do you want to stand up?
Department about privacy, data privacy, GDPR issues related to blockchain.
Are we advising departments?
So I'm concerned, you probably are concerned that do you see any concern?
Yeah, obviously data privacy with the immutable nature of blockchains and with the information switched to it, it means all the information is permanent. And it's something we're very cognizant of, and it's something that's been discussed at definitely the European level. As a department, we're not as concerned with data privacy as the Data Protection Commissioner. So it's not something we've explored through the working group, but it's something that at a European level we're seeing a lot of discussion happening about. And if you look at the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum, who investigate various issues related to blockchain, they released a paper recently which is worth having a read about, called GDPR and blockchain. So.
Okay. Thank you,
Any other
Morgan.
questions?
Oh, we got another one. Sure. One more.
Thank you. Is there anyone doing medical blockchain and medical records?
I haven't seen anything about it. Why are you aware of any? Sure.
I know there's a couple of proof of concepts in there at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, actually a couple of Irish companies looking at it, but there's but it's more from a health insurance perspective.
Okay.
Because if they can consolidate doctors' records with health insurance, etc., on blockchain, then that's fantastic information, and then that's supposed to feed into medical research.
Okay.
So there's some people actually, I do know of some people who are looking at that.
The other one I am aware of as well is there's a lot of interest around prescriptions. So there is a company in Ireland who is using the idea of attributing a token to each prescription that's put out. Well, not prescription, sorry, each packet of prescription medicines essentially. So it's a way to counter the growing use of fake prescription medicines that can be brought online. So if you have a token, we have a unique token attributed to a unique packet of prescription medicines as a way of tracking the history of that packet, so people can verify by using an app whether or not the prescription medicines are actually authentic or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you. Well, I'm going to introduce Barry. Could you help me? There you go. Thanks. And so I know it feels a little weird to hold a microphone in your hand. We're not all Britney Spears. So, but we do have people on YouTube watching this, so I think it helps with the sound. Thanks. So Barry Hayes is our next speaker. Barry Hayes is a lecturer in electrical power systems at University College Cork, Ireland. He holds a PhD from the University of Edinburgh and has worked in industry and in academia in Spain, UK, Ireland, and the USA. He's a senior member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. Okay, ready?
Okay.
This is for you. Thank you very much, Barry.
Thanks for inviting me to speak. This is great to see such interest. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to introduce the energy project. So the tagline here is towards more decentralized and consumer-centric electricity markets. And what I want to talk about is, first of all, talk about the motivation behind this project. And then I'm going to do a quick introduction of each of the different work packages in the project, just to kind of give an overview of the work that's going on. And I'm going to finish up with some, I suppose, some kind of open questions and areas for future work and what we'll look at in the rest of the project and hopefully in future projects along this. So to start off, background and motivation. So present electricity markets are not flexible or decentralized enough to integrate massive numbers of distributed energy resources efficiently. And one of the biggest problems that we have in this is that if you're a small electricity user with local energy resources, your options for being able to interact and participate in the electricity market are very limited in the current system. Another motivation for this, in Ireland, we have some of the highest electricity bills in Europe. If we look at what actually goes into your residential electricity bill, so around 35% of your residential electricity bill goes to the direct costs associated with electricity generation, and that figure varies slightly depending on fuel costs and so on. And the other 65% will go to the costs of electricity transmission, distribution, retail, and taxes. And so the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, they're always going to be central to the electricity system. So we're always going to need transmission and distribution. But what a lot of projects around blockchain and energy are going after is retail. So can we use blockchain to remove some of the intermediaries? So some of the traders, the bank service providers, and the electricity retailers, or reduce the cost of those and pass those costs onto the consumer. And the third point here, individual consumers and energy communities who have their own local energy resources, under current regulations, they're still required to purchase electricity from the grid. So for example, if my neighbour, or if we have a local energy community, one of my neighbours has renewable energy resources, and he has more than he's able to use, and he wants to sell electricity to me, and he wants to sell that electricity to me at a price that's lower than what I can buy from the grid. We can't trade electricity under the present regulations, and everything has to go with the grid and comply with the regulations and standards of the grid. If we have local energy production, this needs to be either self-consumed on site or sold to the grid at an unfavorable rate. So for example, at the moment in Ireland, we don't have a feed-in tariff for solar energy. So as a consumer, you're encouraged to try and adjust your demand or possibly install storage. So you self-consume or you auto-consume all of that generation, because if you export that energy to the grid, you don't get a kilowatt hour rate for it. So these are the kind of problems that we're trying to address in this. So okay, so all this has brought about a recent interest in more decentralized, or the word I use here is consumer-centric electricity markets. So electricity markets that are centered around the consumer, such as what we're looking at in the energy project, which is peer-to-peer trading with blockchains. So it's not the first project in this space. So we've seen over the last few years a number of small-scale demonstrator projects, such as the Brooklyn microgrid is probably one of the most famous one of these. There are also some very interesting projects in Western Australia and in the Netherlands on this, where they've actually implemented this. So they've actually implemented peer-to-peer energy trading in a small community. So people are buying and selling renewable energy with their neighbours over the blockchain. But what all these projects have in common is that they're small-scale trials, and they're on what we call private wires. So they're on privately owned network infrastructure. So for example, you have a microgrid where basically the normal rules and standards of the electricity grid don't apply, and you can basically do what you want. There are a number of research projects out there where they're using a section of the distribution grid that's been set aside as an experimental part of the network. So again, you can do what you want. You don't have to comply with the regulations. You don't have to comply with the standards around power quality and so on. What's very unclear at the moment is how these projects can be scaled up. So at some point, if we want to scale up these projects, we're going to need to use the distribution network. We're going to need to use ESB network grid or wherever the distribution system operator is. So one of the things that we want to look at in EnerPort is what would the impacts on system operation and planning be if we do that. So just to give an overview of the current centralized electricity market. So some of you are probably very familiar with this already, but it is basically just an illustration of the different entities involved in the current centralized electricity market. And we can see that flowing between, you probably can't see it too easily with the colors here, but we can see, apologies. So we can see the different flows between them. So we have flows of electricity, we have flows of payments, and we have flows of data. And as you can see here, we have a lot of different entities. So we have network operators, we have generation companies, we have electricity retailers, bank payment service providers, and so on. So one of the things that we're looking at when we talk about blockchain energy is, can we use blockchain to remove some of these roles or reduce some of these roles? So, for example, instead of having to go through a bank payment service provider and electricity retailer to do some peer-to-peer transactions, can we automate that and implement that through blockchain and reduce the costs of trading electricity? So I'll just this. Decentralized electricity market. So there've been lots of different ideas out in the scientific literature in the last number of years around decentralized electricity markets and how we could trade electricity in a more decentralized way. I think that there's a publication from Nature Energy a couple of years ago, which I think shows it very nicely. It shows different structures for potential decentralized electricity markets. So as you can see here, this one over here on the far left, this is what they call a full peer-to-peer market. So each peer can trade directly with any of its neighbors. And as we move over to the right, you can see more structured markets. So for example, if we go over to the far right here, basically we have a number of microgrids or community energy systems, and they trade electricity with each other, and then they each trade in a centralized electricity market. So there are lots of different possible options for decentralized electricity markets. So to give an overview of the EnerPort project, so the project was launched in March 2018. It's funded by Enterprise Ireland and by the industry partners. So you can see here some of the press releases that were launched at the time of the project. You can see some of the project partners here looking cold and uncomfortable with the photos taken outside in Cork in spring. Sorry, just keep skipping ahead. Bear with me. So the project consortium, it's made up of 3 research partners and 3 industry partners. So the three research partners are the IERC, who we're hopefully all familiar with now, National University of Ireland Galway and University College Cork. And the 3 industry partners are Semicon, so they're a manufacturer of electronic products and mainly IoT products for building energy management systems. So they're represented by Giga Gender here today. We System Link, they look after energy management and heating systems. And we also have Verbatim, who are a blockchain consultancy based in London. So a quick outline of the project and the different work packages or WPs. So the first work package looks at market models for peer-to-peer energy trading and how to implement these in the blockchain. The second work package looks at the lab demonstration of the hardware and software required for peer-to-peer energy trading. The third work package looks at this idea of co-simulation of peer-to-peer energy trading and the electricity distribution networks. And finally, work package 4 is regulations and policy issues. So for the first work package, just to give a quick overview, this is something that Subhasis will cover a bit more detail in his presentation. So one of the trade models that we used was a distributed double auction. So in a typical double auction, you have buyers and sellers. So in this case, it's individual prosumers, so consumers that also produce their own energy, or more likely their agents, because these controls will run on a local home energy management system. They submit their energy requirements and they set the maximum price that they're willing to pay for electrical energy and a minimum sell price if they have local energy resources. So in a traditional double auction, these will all be submitted to a central auctioneer who matches all the buy and sell bids and sets the market clearing price that everyone will pay. In a distributed double auction, this can be implemented using the blockchain. So the idea here that we remove the need for this trusted centralized third party, or in other words, the auctioneer, and this verifies all the transactions between the parties. So just to give a simple example of some of the idea behind transactions and their transaction forwarding for the double auction. So if you imagine each of these houses has their own local resources, and the red figures here are demand requests. So these are energy demand, and the green is energy supply. So if a demand request can be met by, say, for example, if N5's demand request can be met or balanced locally by N4, a smart contract is settled, or if not, this transaction is forwarded on to the next peer. and so on. So the idea is to try and balance energy locally, and if it can't be balanced energy locally, then you need to go to the grid. Work package 2 is on the lab demonstration of peer-to-peer energy trade. So what we wanted to do here was to build a proof of concept demonstration in the lab that would test all of the individual bits of hardware, software, and communications to implement a peer-to-peer energy trade between two users. So we'd set up a metering system at each user. This would connect to a server. We'd have a middleware that would connect that to the blockchain. And based on metered supply on one side and metered generation on the other side, this would automatically kick off a smart contract, and we would actually test all of the hardware and software and communications protocols in between. So we have a group of prosumers that may have different energy resources. So we set up a monitoring system for each prosumer. So this shows the energy monitoring hardware installed in a typical Irish residential building. So the typical residential Irish building in this case is actually my house. So as you can see, the meter is an old style mechanical meter. So obviously we're having a smart meter rollout, which will begin next year, I believe. But in any case, we wanted to have a system that was open source, so that we know we'd be able to access all of the information and do what we wanted with it for the purposes of the projects. We install it's an open energy monitor system. So basically, we've got a current sensor here that clamps onto the mains, and we've also got a voltage sensor that plugs into the any socket in the house to get a voltage measurement. This gives us an accurate power measurement every 10 seconds. This goes up onto a server, so you can see here the energy use in my house, and it's broken down by day and by week and so on. And between this and our blockchain simulator, we have middleware which is implemented as a JavaScript API, and this handles all the responses and requests and actually deals with putting this up onto the blockchain. So it's still a work in progress, but we have most of these parts in place. For work package 3, we're looking at developing a co-simulation tool. So this is looking at the idea of trying to develop a tool where we can simulate the effects of different decentralized energy trading mechanisms on the electricity grid. So you can see here, we've data from each user. So we have the demands, electric vehicle profiles, PV profiles, and so on. We use a Python simulator at the moment to simulate, in this case, a double auction for peer-to-peer energy trading. By the end of the project, that will be actually implemented in Ethereum. And then to model the electricity distribution networks, we use a software called OpenDSS, and we're able to model the networks, full three-phase networks right down to low voltage. And using this, we're able to look at the effects of different trading mechanisms on voltages, power flows, and so on. So I'll move through this pretty quickly because I'm running out of time. So just to give a bit more detail, so we have just an example of a low voltage secondary residential distribution network. So we have smart metered demand profiles, and we've added in electric vehicle profiles, PV profiles at a resolution of 1 minute. We're able to, so we use OpenDSS to model the medium voltage and low voltage distribution grids, and we look at the effects of different energy trading mechanisms. So most of the stuff that we're doing, where the users will actually adjust their electric vehicle charging schedules, and we can look at what the effects are on the voltages and power flows and power quality and so on in the grid. So for example, this graph here, this shows we 55 users connect to the grid, and it shows for each time step how the voltage changes when we apply all of these demand, PV, and EV profiles. Work package 4 looks at the regulations and policy, so how to integrate peer-to-peer trading models with existing electricity market and regulations. Can we use DSO, owned network infrastructure, for peer-to-peer trading? In Ireland, this is currently not permitted under the Electricity Regulation Act. So in order to do peer-to-peer energy trading, you need to be a registered generator and retailer. So you need to have a Commission for Regulation of Utilities license. So that's probably too difficult to set up for your small user. Future work and questions. So at the moment we're about seven months or so into the project, so we've more questions than answers, I suppose. So first of all, what is the optimal design for a decentralized electricity market? Should it be a peer-to-peer market or something more like a community-based trading system? What are the hardware and communications requirements? So you see a lot of stuff and a lot of academic work on peer-to-peer energy trading, decentralized electricity networks that assumes that you have the IT communications infrastructure in there that has 100% reliability, zero latency, infinite bandwidth. You can get out all the data you need. That's not always the case, so that's often a big missing part of these projects. Another issue is, what is the optimal timescale for scheduling and executing peer-to-peer energy trades? Do we try and have something like the current wholesale electricity market, or do we try and implement something closer to real time? And finally, how can peer-to-peer trading coexist with the highly regulated wholesale electricity market? So that's about all I have to say. So for more information, there's publications and with a number of online links for the project. So we're hoping to make as much of this stuff open source as well as possible. So thanks very much for listening.
We probably have time for one question. There's a burning one. Absolutely. Susan?
Are you looking at some type of consortium-based blockchain to support this, or will it be public, or some kind of hybrid structure, or how do you kind of want voters?
Yeah, we've been looking at that question. Probably Subhasis is probably better placed to answer me. But yeah. The more we've looked at, the more we're moving away from a public blockchain for this, because you'll probably have the DSO will probably have a role in this, and will probably be managing a lot of it. So that would push you more towards a private blockchain.
And are you stuck on blockchain, or are you going to look at anything else? So, like in the DLT space, will you look at the DAX or Tempo or something as an alternative to blockchain? You know, because there are issues with scalability around blockchain. So, will you look at alternate DLT type architectures?
Yeah, I mean,
actually, we are working on that scalability issues, and hopefully we'll be work on that in the next project. We use the blockchain, so not the alternatives.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So, which blockchain are you testing? Is it Ethereum? Are you going
Right now, we are using Ethereum.
Ethereum? Okay.
Okay. Subhasis, those might have been your questions. Very good. Thank you very much. This is good. It's getting heated up, I can tell. Excellent. So our next speaker is Dr. Subhasis Thakur, who received his PhD from Griffith University in Australia. He has worked as a researcher at the University of Liverpool, University of L'Aquila, and National University of Ireland, Galway. His research interests are multi-agent systems, game theory, and blockchain. He's participating in several research projects on the application of blockchains, including fintech, smart grid, and supply chain management.
I'll talk about the trade models that we developed in our EnerPort project. Then I'll talk about the issues or challenges we face in developing a large-scale deployment for blockchain technology for the P2P energy trade. So I will start with the trade models we have developed so far. So the first trade model we worked on is coalition formation, which is basically a way of solving this energy trade problem in a collaborative way or cooperative way. And in this problem, we basically partition the microgrids into the groups, and within each group, the microgrids trade energy among themselves. And we developed these algorithms on how to partition the microgrids, and basically how to divide the sort of what's the benefit from energy trade using blockchains. So more details about this paper, this research is available on this paper. The next model, as Barry talked about, we also worked on a distributed double auction model, where we used sort of a supply demand information, and we try to match it locally. So in a centralized double auction, you will have one auctioneer, but blockchain will replace the auctioneer, and it will execute multiple local double auctions in a sort of asynchronous way, so that you can match those energy requirements locally rather than matching it with someone in a far distance. The third model we are working on is how we can integrate P2P energy trade with electric vehicles. So electric vehicles are basically mobile and sort of flexible demand. So how we can use it in a sort of better uses for P2P energy trade. For example, here microgrid 1 and microgrid 2, if they cannot sort of trade energy, it is possible that they can trade the electric vehicle charging requirement. So, for example, if electric vehicle arrives at the location of microgrid 1 and it doesn't have a surplus energy, then it can send that electric vehicle to another location. So, how we can integrate electric vehicle charging charging market with the peer-to-peer trade market. So this is the basic model we used for this problem, where we partition this peer-to-peer market according to the supply-demand information of the electric vehicles and historical information on when the electric vehicles will arrive. And based on that partition, we allocate the electric vehicles to the optimal charging stations, and ultimately we divide the wealth gain from all this coalition structure. So all this interoperation is basically encoded as a blockchain smart contracts. As an extension of the previous sort of trade model, we also worked on electric vehicle queue management. So this basically talks about we have multiple entities. So what we can have is that we have a heterogeneous or multiple entities who controls those charging stations. And the problem with that setting is that if we have multiple parties who owns those charging stations, there may be a lack of trust, and we also need a secure mechanism for governance or to monitor those charging stations. So we use blockchains to coordinate the charging load for these heterogeneous charging stations, and the solution looks like this. So at first, one electric vehicle will buy a token using some other currency, then it will send the token to the blockchain peer-to-peer network. That token will be a sort of labeled with a particular set of charging stations where the electric vehicle should go and get charged and pay with those particular tokens. So it basically means that blockchain can be used as a kind of enforcement mechanisms where I will restrict the charging points of electric vehicle to a particular set of charging points. And that decision comes from the electrical engineering side. I mean, where we basically the load balancing side of it. So blockchain can also be used not only for as a sort of a secure, transparent operation, but can be also use some sort of enforcement mechanism here. This is the same how we can solve this problem. So based on all these trade models, we have identified a few problems with the existing blockchain technology. And the first problem is scalability. So scalability, the main problem is how we can define scalability for blockchain. So the first point is that how long it will take to record a transaction into a block. The second is that how much time will take to all the bits to acknowledge the one block as a current block. That's basically time to reach a consensus. And the third time is that how long it will take for a transaction confirmation. So if we go through this one, first time we create a transaction, that transaction gets recorded. So it takes some time. Then that miner, that relate entity, that creates a block that records that particular transaction and it announces the transaction. And then if all other miners are happy with that block, then it is basically accepted. And it may happen that even if after accepting the initial block, after some time, due to the network delay, the blockchain may fork. So eventually that particular piece of block may get rejected. So the only way we can say that a block is sort of accepted if there is a certain, say, 10 numbers, say 10 or 12 new blocks after the blocks which contain that particular transaction. So for example, if it takes say 10 minutes to create a new block, and we say that we will need 4 new blocks to say that my transaction is most likely that it will not be rejected by the blockchain. So that means it takes 40 minutes to get the confirmation. So that is a quite high time, big time. So that's the main problem with the scalability, that throughput is very low. Particularly using proof of work based blockchains. So where we are at the proof, basically using some sort of simulations, we have observed that if we increase the number of bits, or if we increase the number of transactions, the time it takes to record the block, the time it takes to accept that block, it increases exponentially. So that there is certainly a scalability problem there. So how much is the scalable? Our current systems are You can see that Bitcoin can process 7 transactions per second. Ethereum is 15 transactions per second, where MasterCard is 50,000 transactions per second. So there is a huge gap between these technologies. So how we can solve scalability? One solution is to increase the block size so you can record more transactions per block. The problem with that, it may increase network delay, and if there is a blockchain fork, then a lot of transactions will get rejected. So that's also a downside of this. Another solution is that you change the consensus principle. I mean, proof of work is basically the most strict consensus principle that assumes that there is absolutely no trust among all the parties. So if you can relax that condition, then you can improve the scalability. So you can design your consensus principle based on some element of trust between the parties. So more the trust between the parties, you can improve the scalability in a much better way. Another solution is offline channels. Offline channels, how it works is basically you create an offline sort of channel between two parties. For example, block 10 here records that there is 20 sort of tokens are between these green and red entities. So I don't need to talk to the main blockchain frequently. Whenever this red and green guy basically transfer tokens among themselves. So whenever they want to close the channel, they can only inform the blockchain. So blockchain only knows that there are 20 tokens between these two parties, and I don't need an immediate update on what's going on with those tokens. Those are sort of set aside. So this is one of the ways we can improve the scalability of blockchain using offline channels. And another way to improve the blockchain and improve the scalability is to use some sort of inter-channel transfer, so you can have paths among pairwise channels. So, for example, this is an example of how we can use channels for supply chain management. So, for example, one big supply chain management company can have many sort of departments, and each department may have multiple channels. And to improve the scalability, instead of using the main blockchain, you can transfer the tokens among those channels, so that the data load on the main blockchain will be less, so that it will be more scalable. Okay, so another way of increasing scalability is to use side channels or use multiple blockchains. So instead of using one blockchain, you can use multiple blockchains. For example, instead of using the first one, the red one, you can use 2, so that the scalability can be immediately improved. So we can use one main blockchain and side channels on to that one, or otherwise we can use multiple blockchains. The next challenge for the blockchain is privacy. So, the blockchain, the main problem is that whoever is in your network can see all the data, so can see all the information. So there is a privacy problem, and there are few solutions. One of the few solutions can be that you can restrict the access to the transactions. So you can put some sort of role-based or access control model on the transactions, and we have designed sort of consensus principles based on such an incomplete information settings. And another problem is that what we are also working is on privacy of those offline channels. So how those offline channels can transfer data among themselves while remaining sort of privacy preserved. So these are the channel. So the next problem is sort of interoperability among the blockchains. So if you want to deploy multiple blockchains, so there is an interoperability problem is basically transferring token from one blockchain to another blockchain. How are you going to basically send transaction from one blockchain to another blockchain while keeping the privacy? I mean, while not knowing the entire sort of data in another blockchain, how we can accept a token from another blockchain. So these are the privacy and interoperability challenges. And this is just the use case for that. So there are 2 solutions. Based on this interoperability solution, what you can use is you can use multiple blockchains, and you can use some cross-blockchain functionality, which will allow you to pass token or pass data from one blockchain to another blockchain. So in that way, you can improve the scalability. And the last challenge what we found is the business model of blockchain. So we have basically 3 entities. We have this computer network, which basically keeps the real data. We have your distribution network, electricity distribution network, and we have other sort of energy generators. So how we can develop the business model that basically satisfies all of them. So developing this business model will require the question. I mean, who is going to pay for the computer network? Who is going to pay for maintaining the electricity distribution network? And how those other energy companies will be sort of compensated? I mean, what will be their roles? I mean, so developing the business model here is probably one of the biggest challenge for large-scale blockchain-based P2P energy trade. So as a summary, we have identified few issues with blockchain-based P2P energy trade. Scalability as a solution, we can use offline channels, we can use multiple blockchains, and we can also look into not proof of work based blockchain. We can assume that there is some sort of trust among those parties, and we can relax the trust condition. And in privacy, we have basically developed methods for privacy preserved token transfer among offline channels and privacy preserved data and token transfer among blockchains. So privacy issues is almost solved there. And business model issues, we need to figure out a lot of questions that, I mean, who pays for the computer network that holds the blockchains, who pays for the energy distribution network and its maintenance, and what's the role for other energy generation companies. So probably the business model development is the biggest challenge among all this. So that's all from my side. So thank you for your attention.
Very good, Subhasis. Thank you for a couple of minutes to spare. Very good. So what questions do you have for Subhasis? Susan, again?
Sorry, Beth.
No, go ahead.
Just in relation to privacy, I was wondering, did you look at any kind of pruning mechanisms? Just to remove anything from the blockchain or anything like that, or the impact it would have on it, and how it would relate to energy trade, etc.
Okay, so for we have algorithms that basically uses something else, just like a graph coloring methods. We have specific graph coloring algorithm that can hide the information between two parties, to form and to information in a graph. So we have algorithms that can route our transactions without knowing where it is going and without knowing where it is coming from.
Right.
How you are going to define the trust? Like there's a trust between the production or between the parties actually. How are you defining the trust?
Okay, that is a very complicated question because trust is a very complicated thing to define. I mean, it depends on the use case, and it depends on the problem you have. There is no general answer to that. Sorry.
Possibly the same question, but in a different guise. So here you mentioned the computer network needs to be paid for, and the previous talk we saw, I think it was I could be wrong, it wasn't clear, but the meter was talking to a database online, which was storing the amount of that particular residence. So where does the data actually lie in this model?
Okay, so we assume that there are a few options for that, and we can basically integrate this trade model with an existing blockchain platform, and you just integrate it with Ethereum or Bitcoin. Some other blockchains, you can just use those miners to record the data. Or we can develop your own blockchain or your own token and develop that business. So there are two ways to do it.
Slight follow-up on that. I was just wondering, is each residence going to be basically holding their own private key to interact with said blockchain?
Yes. So basically every house is like every house or every EV will basically, in our model is like every sort of prosumer or every electric vehicle or every charging stations, all these things are nodes of a blockchain. So basically they are identified as the public key and private key pair. And basically they can transact using some sort of tokens.
Is also one of those You're using public key cryptography, which every blockchain uses, to the best of my knowledge. How are you, like you mentioned, having problems there? How are you dealing with the key management challenge?
We haven't thought about that.
So what happens when your consumers absolutely definitely will lose their private keys?
Yeah, those are problems. I know those are problems, but we haven't thought about those problems yet.
I'll chat to you afterwards.
Quick, I don't even want to. So did you mean to say off-grid or offline?
Offline.
Offline, not off-grid, off-chain.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, off-chain, not off-grid, so definitely offline, not off-chain.
Yeah.
And are you just looking now at proof of work as consensus mechanism? Are you literally going to go through the whole list, like work your way through that from authority from the last time? Or literally, are just going to...
Right now we are working with proof of work, but we will go through other consensus mechanisms.
There's new developments and consensus.
Yes. We're developing consensus mechanisms to make it fast. So we started with proof of work, and then we're going through a lot of other changes to it.
Okay, very good. We're gonna have a panel in a little bit, so there's a chance for you to ask some more questions. So it's great. So again, Subhasis, thank you very much. So, let's see. Our next speaker is Piyush. Very good. Piyush Verma works as a senior energy market analyst at the International Energy Research Center. He has a PhD in energy efficiency technology and policy from the University of Auckland, New Zealand. He's an energy policy professional focused on the development of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and climate change policies through an integrated approach. Piyush also works as a global future energy leader with the World Energy Council, London, and he represents Ireland as future energy leader in global energy dialogues. He's also a member of the blockchain working group at the council and recently contributed in a blockchain report published by the council. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, I've just contributed in a blockchain report which was published by the World Energy Council. So I'm going to talk a bit about that blockchain report, like some perspective, because that report was completely based on 40 people interviews. So we interviewed 40 people from all over the world, like blockchain startups and some regulators and some big companies like NG and Siemens and those kind of organizations who are doing something on blockchain. So that report was based on those. So I'm going to talk about what those bigger organization and blockchain leaders think about the future of this technology in the energy sector. Okay, before going into that, just a bit on the growing interest about the blockchain. Again, before going into the energy sector, I'll just give two key numbers. Beth, I know in the introduction, she was talking about that every day there is something coming on blockchain. I have two numbers. In last 2 years, there are 0.5 million publications has come online with the word blockchain. 0.5 million publications. So you can see just in last 2 years, there's a huge interest. And with that blockchain word, there is 3.7 million Google search has been done in last 2 years. So that kind of interest is coming on blockchain technology. If you talk about the blockchain application in the energy sector, there are already 122 blockchain companies operating in this energy space. So 122 startups, it's already there. And this is as of now, maybe just 3-4 months back. Global investment, if you talk about the basically power sector digital infrastructure, it's growing 20% on an average, 20% per annum since 2014. And there are already more than, not only, so we talked about the peer-to-peer energy trading, but there are several other applications, wholesale energy market and Bitcoin mining within the energy sector. And there are like ETS technology, electric vehicle, how you can get the charging facility at your home and you can get some extra incentive, and that incentive is getting transferred on blockchain technology. So there are more than 100 blockchain applications, and there is already investment, more than like $100 to $300 million has been invested in that space. So there is definitely a growing interest in the energy space as well. There is a growing interest, but it's still an uncertainty. Why it's still an uncertainty? This World Energy Council publishes a World Energy Issues Monitor every year. And this Issues Monitor was published in 2017. And this is based on a survey conducted at the global level. And more than 1,200 people have responded to that survey. And 1,200 people, all like CEOs and energy ministers, even energy ministers have responded to this survey. So it's a very high level survey. And all these leaders, if you see, there are, so World Energy Council take like different parameters and different issues maps. And it's from the like geopolitical issues, how India and China is going to impact the whole global energy thing, or like, business model environment, or technology and policy vision and those kind of issue maps. So if you see in this one, there are like cyber threats, extreme weather risk, decommissioning, nuclear. There are several other. It's more than I think 80 issues maps that they have considered. If you see IoT blockchain, it's on the very high impact side and the high uncertainty side. So x-axis is showing the impact, and this is uncertainty. If you divide in 4 quadrants, so the top right hand, this quadrant is basically, it's very high impact and high uncertainty, and we say that these are the issues which keeps the energy leaders most awake at night. So energy leaders are not able to sleep because of thinking about blockchain, data AI, digitalization, and those kind of things. So it's going to make a high impact, but highly uncertain. If you talk about the bottom right one, that quadrant, that's high impact, but low uncertainty, like renewable energy, economic growth, electricity prices, energy efficiency. We know there is a high impact and a low uncertainty. So that keeps the energy leaders most busy at work. So energy leaders are working on those kind of things. These are kind of weak issues and so on. So I wanted to highlight there on the IoT blockchain, that's definitely, there is a positive sign, there is an impact, but it's still uncertain. What are those uncertainties? So we asked like, why that's a big challenge, why people are uncertain about the technology. And the thing came out, the first thing, the highest percentage, 67%, that's unclear regulatory protocols. So we are talking about peer-to-peer energy trading and those kind of decentralized energy market, digitalization, but there is no, as of now, there is no regulatory support coming, and I think regulators are still seeing the market, there is a silence from that side, so they want to judge the market. Maybe there will be a move at the later stage, but all these more than 1,200 people and those whom we interviewed, they think unclear regulatory protocols is a big challenge. And then definitely lack of expertise, because blockchain technology, it's a very new, there is no kind of program, or there is no courses where you can just go and learn. Very few courses. MIT had just started a course on blockchain technology. So still there is a big gap here. And so those companies, they want to implement blockchain, but they're not able to find the right expertise. And then current limitations of blockchain technology. So we asked, what are the current limitations? And so 2 things has come out, and that 2T problem with blockchain. And 2T is, one is technology and one is transaction. When you talk about in terms of technology, that scalability and reliability, which you heard from the previous presentations. So from technology point of view, scalability and reliability, it's people think that that companies who tries to implement, they are still they think it's not reliable, to go at the bigger level, and how we are going to manage the security, privacy, and those kind of other stuff. So reliability and scalability is a big problem from the technology point of view. If you talk about the other T, that is transaction, cost of transaction and speed of transaction, that's 2 other big issues. So still, when we are talking about the demo level, or just maybe one small community at the rental level, that's okay. But how we are going to manage at the larger scale, how we are going to manage the speed of those transactions or cost of those transactions. So that's another issue. So these were the 3 big issues which came out in that interviews and surveys. let's talk about the disruption. So it's a disruptive technology. Blockchain is a disruptive technology, but it's not about only regulatory thing. This peer-to-peer energy trading. It's definitely we need regulatory support for that, because as of now, regulation doesn't support to go for the you need electricity license and those kind of things to do at the energy trading. But the other thing is, peer-to-peer trading can't happen without consumers. So we need customer engagement, consumer engagement. And that's how the two most important thing is regulatory enablers and that customer engagement. These are the two most important thing in case of if we talk about the peer-to-peer energy trading. And why I'm focusing peer-to-peer energy trading here? Because as of now, I said 122 blockchain companies out there and more than 100 blockchain applications are being implemented. So out of total, 45% projects are P2P applications, 45%. So that's a very high number. So most energy sector blockchain applications are focusing on blockchain. So that's why, if you talk about the, if there is a regulatory enablers and there is a lack of customer engagement, so you can just predict the disruption. That disruption is going to happen. We need customer engagement. We need customers to get into the, to show their interest, to get into the learn this consumer concept where we are talking about, how you can produce their own electricity or monetize your excess electricity basically. So if you have put solar panel on your roof, use your own electricity, and then if you have excess electricity, go into the market, sell it. So those kind of consumer concept. So that kind of customer engagement we need. And if there will be customer engagement and there will be regulatory support, then only we can talk about the transformative disruption. And that transformative disruption is actually disruptive innovation. Yeah, because that disruptive innovation, we are not talking about the kind of just efficiency innovation, or we are not talking about the just evolutionary innovation. I'll give you just one analogy. For example, if you think about the candle light, and if you think about the electric bulb, so if you are just thinking about the, improving doing some kind of evolutionary innovation or kind of efficiency innovation, you wouldn't have got the electric bulb. So getting an electric bulb when we have this candle light, that was a disruptive innovation. And that's kind of disruptive innovation we are talking about, because it's completely this offline, online blockchain, digitalization, customer engagement, customers are more smart. So that disruption is going to happen. And that is basically this going to transform the whole energy sector. In terms of regulatory support, it's kind of, I'm just going to put some key thoughts here, because we have made some policy recommendations in that blockchain report we have just published. So what these things came out from these talking to people, it was 1 hour interview, so we had 40 hours talking to all these experts. So the thing they were looking from regulators, that's defining key terminologies. So as of now, we are talking about prosumer, active citizen, consumer. It hasn't come out from the regulator. What do you mean by prosumer, or what do you mean by active energy citizen? Is active energy citizen just active controlling the whole energy consumption in their home and monitoring it, or active energy consumer is active energy citizen is who produces the energy? So who is active energy citizen? How we define the prosumer? Those kind of definitions. So those kind of definitions, as kind of standard definitions we need from the regulators, so that the businesses, blockchain startups and regulators, everybody can talk on the same platform. Defining a transition policy. Transition policy, we are moving from a very vertical integrated utilities market. Regulators were very kind of focused at the central level, that regulatory model. But now we are going to decentralize the energy market. And how that regulatory change is, we need a regulatory change. So it's basically, we need a transition policy. We don't need a whole decentralized regulation, but we need a transition policy. And because all these big companies are coming into the market, so we don't, the regulator should not stop the innovation. Regulators should enable the innovation. And to enable that innovation, some kind of guidelines, some kind of support, these, interviews we are looking for. New tariff structure. When you talk about the new tariff structure, is basically again, talking about how we are going to, because when you do about peer-to-peer energy trading, and you're not going to create a new infrastructure, you are going to transfer the electricity on the same wire owned by distribution companies, and how that pricing mechanism is going to work. If I'm going to transfer electricity to this person, how much money I need to pay to the distribution companies to use that electric wire? So those kind of question is coming. If I'm going to do peer-to-peer energy trading, maybe just in my local community, or maybe I'm going to transfer electricity to maybe 15 or 20 kilometers from here, is there any incentive for me, like if I'm doing at a local level, or is there any kind of how that pricing mechanism will work, for the local traveling electrons or for the far level traveling electrons? So that kind of pricing mechanism that people are looking for. Then again, enabling the integration, we need to create an integration platform, where all these distribution companies, transmission operators, consumers, they can sit together and they can talk about these transition policy, how that transition, how we can integrate into the market, how that is going to happen. Yeah, okay. And then I'll just quickly go through, So again, empowering utilities, because utilities also need to, enable consumers. Without consumer, as I said, that disruptive innovation is not going to happen. So regulators need to empower utilities to enable consumers. So that some kind of new framework is required. And again, empowering consumers and providing simplicity. Consumers don't want complexity, So if you want peer-to-peer energy trading to happen, to become a reality, you need to create some kind of simple model. And again, we definitely need collaboration. And one important thing I would like to discuss here, protecting the consumers and businesses. Because of this disruption, if I want to be a prosumer and I want to feed my excess electricity into the grid, and if I want to feed my excess electricity, I'm not sure about the quality. Who is going to maintain that quality? Maybe I'm producing a bad electricity, putting into the wire, and because of my interference into the wire, that someone who is not prosumer, he is going to be affected. There is a blackout. That electricity goes to the line, and because I put bad electricity, it's whole blackout, And the person who wants to just get a quality access, 220 volt, 50 hertz, he becomes affected. So we need regulation as a consumer protection as well. Our regulators, how that is going to come out. And then again, cybersecurity is coming as a big thing, because for cybersecurity, we have whole lot of data is going to come, and how we are going to protect the data. Just we are talking about smart meters. When we'll put smart meters in whole at the world level, all these conventional meters will be converted into smart meters. We'll have 700 times more data. And it should be all over on the server and somewhere. So how we are going to, because cybersecurity is already, data is being hacked, and it's going to increase in the future as well. So cybersecurity, we don't want only cyber prevention, we need cyber resilience. If something got hacked, electricity system got hacked, how quickly and efficiently we are going to restore the system. So we need to invest in cyber prevention as well and cyber resilience at the same time. And that's my last slide, talking about the consumer engagement. So this is the earlier conventional consumer, as a old customer model. That was basically, they wanted to be behind the meter, but now customer want to go beyond the meter. And to go beyond the meter, they want to get engaged into the data. They want to digitalize. They want everything on mobile app, and those kind of things. They want collaboration with the electricity companies, how they can reduce their electricity consumption, how they can produce the electricity. They want choices. They don't want just one tariff model or one pricing model. They want choice, They want to have 3-4 different options for their electricity and all. So that, and it was completely, so earlier the traditional customer model was, if they were electricity provider was giving the reliable supply and pricing structure and information on the system, and if they were resolving any problem. So that was kind of, customer were saying, oh, I'm completely happy with that. So that was performance-based model. But now customer is looking for engagement-based model. So that is going to happen. And that's all. So customer engagement matters not only for sustainability, for your income as well. And it's income, it's all about how you are going to develop your business model. So it's not about a disruptive technology only, we need disruptive business model as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush. Questions? Questions? No? Okay,
Sorry, I have one actually.
oh, there you go.
There's a lot of talk about legislation and regulation.
Yeah.
Nothing in particular. Which is absolutely fascinating. But with a lot of cryptocurrency as well, it hasn't necessarily been defined as a currency. It hasn't had a formal definition anywhere yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So, sorry, not quite exactly, but I know there's been statements out on it, et cetera, but if there's a barter system, are they under regulation where, let's say, you trade, it's not necessarily cryptocurrency, but you're trading electricity for something else, another utility? Is that still governed by the same regulations and does it still have the same issues?
No, I don't think it's covered by the same regulation.
So is there a challenge associated with that in that you're looking at not necessarily a barter system, but a selling from a consumer's perspective? Is that the main barrier in regulation perspective?
Yeah, that's the main. So you're saying selling from one consumer to another consumer, is it something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's the main barrier. Yeah. So everybody is saying that because in I think almost all the countries, they don't have that kind of regulatory support. There's no regulatory provision where you can do that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely need to come somehow that so the question is, if as a prosumer, I want to sell my electricity, do I need an electricity license, like electricity selling license or something? So that is still a big question.
But if you want to exchange it in a barter system, that's it.
I'm not sure about that, no.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, yeah.
Because I just know that they're doing that in South Africa at the moment in a small area, and it's
Mhm.
fascinating in terms of the barter system.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'm not sure yet.
And probably Barry knows better, but in Ireland, you have a license to both sell and
It depends on who owns the network infrastructure. I mean, if you want to buy your own wires and build your own electricity system, you can do whatever you want. But once you want to use the network infrastructure, you have to abide by all the regulations.
Okay, gotcha.
so that's the case. But say the likes of Spain, I do know you don't need a license to actually have microgrids. So you don't actually have your regulatory requirement over there is that you actually are at all times plugged into the grid. So it's just a case of licensing and regulations might be different in each country and understanding those and how they fit into the model.
Yeah. All right, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very good. Great.
So I'm going to introduce Matt, who is going to run the panel, and then most of the speakers you know, except maybe one. So, all right. Matt Kennedy heads the strategy and business function for the International Energy Research Center. And prior to this role, Matt led national and international energy R&D initiatives for the past decade on behalf of the Irish government and the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. Matt held the position of senior advisor on energy and climate issues and delivered the SEAI strategy 2010 to 2015. In this role, he worked across government to deliver policy analysis, including national wind energy planning guidelines and technology roadmaps. This required cross-institutional and cross-sectoral team management skills. So if there's a tussle on the panel, Matt can handle it. And internationally, Matt has developed an international energy profile as the EU negotiator on technology transfer, IP, and trade issues at COP21 in Paris, and is chair of a collaborative group of 10 OECD countries that pooled finance for research collaborative activities. Matt works with developing countries as a previous chair of the UN's Climate Technology Center and Network in Copenhagen, and the chair of the program board of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnership in Vienna. There you go. I'll hand this over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Beth. Firstly, you've met everyone apart from Gajendra. So you're very welcome, Gajendra Kushwaha from Semicon, one of our industry members. Gajendra is an electronics engineer and embedded software professional with 8 years experience in conceptualization and development of products and solutions for IoT and all sorts of complicated things like that. So the good thing, and you've met everyone else, the good thing about this is that there are no more slides. So, but the bad thing is most of the questions have been asked and most of the challenges have been raised. So I'm struggling to try to find what to ask, but we'll figure it out. So what I started by doing really is thinking about how blockchain, and really when this project began, it began on distributed ledger, and we hadn't really decided on which form of technology we were going to focus on, and we found it difficult to identify what discipline to focus on in terms of research. So what we ended up doing is to bring some economists together with some electrical engineers and some data analytics people from Insight, and then we built a consortium of research people. Then what we also did is try to, because we were here to respond to industry, so we had Verbatim and Kieran sends his apologies, he's stuck in Dublin, but we also had Semicon with Kagendra here, and we had SystemLink, Terry Madigan and his company. So what we tried to do is to identify for industry what their big challenge was. So what really the focus of this panel really is to talk about how this applies to energy, if at all. And I always like to describe the energy system in the picture here. Of course, you all know what I mean, don't you? But everything that's in the bowl is the way we traditionally think of our energy system. So it's centralized, it's all connected. Everybody really cares about security of supply and making sure the lights don't go out. There's energy flows between all the different parts within the bowl. And what we're really focusing on today, I guess, is how the flows happen between the blueberries and the raspberries underneath, and not necessarily about the bowl. But don't get me wrong, the IERC are very interested in the bowl. We have lots of utilities that we work with, so they're very interested in some of the large multinationals and what happens in the bowl. But for today, really, in terms of the energy trends, and I'm not going to talk for very long before I ask some questions around who pays, really. But the energy trends tend to be around the Ds, you know. So you heard certainly in the last week, ESRI yesterday, the people talking about the emissions budgets today, but the importance of decarbonisation, the importance of decentralisation, the importance of deepening energy access, and how you would dematerialize energy. So energy in the past was all about coal and stuff, hard stuff you could hold on to, but now it's about solar and wind and things that are less complicated to hold on to, let's say. But really today is about the 50, which is really about digitalization, I guess. And everybody talks in the Irish system from an electrical perspective around the grid, but very few people talk about what happens beyond the grid in a distributed, decentralized kind of system, and what does that mean? And that's really what we're focusing on today. So the problem with often what's happening in the bowl is that it's inefficient, and it's also expensive, and it's also vulnerable, and really is distributed ledger a way of overcoming the challenges around that? You know, someone came up with the idea of the blockchain, as Beth said, around 10 years ago. And I was talking to Siemens around a month ago in Berlin, and they said, well, in 2016, it was all about blockchain tourism. People were talking about blockchain, but didn't really understand what they were talking about. And then last year, it was really about a proof of a concept. But now it's all, this is going to be the panacea that we were waiting for. It's going to help us with supply chains and digital currencies. It'll help us shape our processes, and it'll create some impact in the economy. But will it really? Because what I hear at the moment is it's all about demonstration. It's all about pilots, but can we build the scale? And the guys talked about those scaling issues. And that's something I want to come back to a little bit. But the first one really is, I'm going to start with Morgan, because we pick on the guy from the Department of Finance first. Morgan talked about coin exchange and trade finance and supply chains and wallet providers. There's all these type organizations that are involved in blockchain. But so that's all the experience from the financial industry. How can that translate to the energy sector? Great questions.
Well, what you're seeing with financial services sector, which is particularly interesting, is you've got very, very large competitors cooperating together to work to employ blockchain solutions to improve the way they deliver their services. It's less relevant with the wallets providers and so on, but if you look at WeTrade, or actually an Irish company, or an Irish based joint venture, it's a partnership between 13 different of the banks, more in Europe, some of the largest banks in Europe, and they're actually cooperating because they see the value in implementing blockchain solutions that can deliver a better customer service. And now what they do is essentially arrange trade finance loans for the customers. One of the big problems with trade finance is for SMEs, small businesses, to actually transact cross-border. By building blockchain and all the banks sharing the information together, it makes it a lot easier for every single bank's SME customers to actually transact. And you're seeing the exact same in the payments industry. You're seeing JP Morgan are partnering up with 75 plus banks to improve the efficiency of international payments. So they're working on a blockchain solution that allow up to about 14,000 US dollar denominated transactions to be transferred around the world. So that's going to cut out some of the centralized infrastructure that was there before. So your Swift platforms, your Swift messaging services there. So I think in terms of what the energy sector can learn from it, it's really about potential cooperation. We're trying to find ways that you can cooperate with in other countries or between different energy service providers here in Ireland, and getting them to work together to build solutions.
For the energy sector, though, that means a big change. That means people were referring to it just right at the end there. So we don't allow net metering in the country, so any utility will take your excess energy, they won't pay you for it. So the energy trade is easy. It's validation of the trade, that's the tricky bit. And getting paid for that is also a tricky bit. So why would the system operator, be it ESBN or gas or whoever, why would they want to change? It's only going to disturb their local asset, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what we saw in the financial services sector is the reason that Santander and JP Morgan are building these blockchain solutions is because they're seeing that they're not getting even in the sense that they're seeing people being able to transact using the app like Circle I mentioned earlier, or using more traditional payments apps like a currency fair, things like that, to transfer money abroad. So if you do start to see the rise of properly decentralized peer-to-peer networks in small towns and people cooperating together with their own infrastructure, then they're going to start losing it in customer base. So there may be an incentive there for them to actually work together and cooperate.
Oh yeah, losing customers, then they'll work, yeah, for sure. Vijendra, a question for you in terms of the business side. So generally, anything I read about blockchain, the criticism is, it's very theoretical. It'll never be applied to business. How can a company like Semicon, how can you make any money from this?
It's a very starting of such technologies, and for a company like Semicon, when the IoT is a buzzword like blockchain, we jump into that technology, and now we are one of the leaders in Ireland. So what the companies like SMEs currently thinking of the blockchain to give it a go, to understand what is the market gap between the providers and users, or what we have to do to bring that concept into the reality. Just for an example, in the Paris presentation we saw, if we are using the old meter and then we put the smartness on that old meter. So like MC was thinking for a meter which is enabled with the blockchain. So we don't have to go to the cloud to run the middleware. The middleware can run on the meter itself. So developing the products, especially for the blockchain, which will be useful in the ecosystem of energy trading or other trading in the future.
Yeah, and in terms of, that works for industry, but when I think of the academics, right, Subhasis and Barry, and you're piloting, and then the challenge that you talk about is about scale. So can it go beyond the pilot in terms of the energy sector? Can you scale up a blockchain technology so it can be rapidly deployed?
Yes, I think we can scale it up because, as you mentioned, that the first sort of development scalable blockchain is in the fintech sector. In the banking sector, they're already using these technologies on how to develop this next generation of high scale blockchain. So once those sort of proof of concepts are validated in fintech sector, we will have more confidence on using this technology for energy sector.
And then in terms of the energy sector, Barry, maybe for you, there's significant investment to digitalize the grid. Really what we're talking about is more data going onto the grid. And then is there a role for energy storage then? Do we need storage to have blockchain?
Do we need storage to have blockchain? I think that there's possibly a role for it. I think we probably will see more storage on the grid. I think in the next number of years. It'll obviously depend on how much the cost of storage comes down, and also on the ownership model. So is it something owned by, say, the distribution network operator, or is this something that people are going to install individually in their own house? And I think there's still, again, going back to regulations, I think there's still a regulatory problem around storage, in that regulators aren't quite sure whether to treat storage as generation or as a network asset. So if you're discharging your storage device, are you a generator, or are you supporting the grid, are you part of the network asset infrastructure? But I suppose to answer the question, if we're trying to do this on a peer-to-peer basis, and if you're providing either a service to other peers on the grid and that you can store their renewable energy, so they can get a better price for their renewable energy, or if you're providing an energy service to the grid, using your battery that you have in the house, how do you keep track of all that information? How do you validate all of that information? Is there a way that we can automate that and keep a verified record, a mutable record that no one can go back and change? So there's possibly a role for blockchain. That, I suppose, what it also says about what's possibly coming even sooner on the grid than storage is, if you look at the electrification of heat and transport, it's probably something that will come even sooner. So that's really going to have a big impact on the grid. If we can't control, for example, heat pumps and electric vehicles, and how do we control that? How do we reward users or prosumers for being able to adjust their habits? So there's possibly a role.
Yeah, I'll come back to the validation bit, because it's something that Subhasis talked about around trust. But in terms of, so you mentioned the regulator. So if I'm from the CRU, I'm only interested, I'm representing the consumer to give them cheap electricity price. I don't care about anything else. So will blockchain not make things more expensive? All this investment in digitalization, versus how much energy is at the moment.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, that's the entire point. I mean, there's no point of any of this unless we can deliver electricity at a lower cost to customers. So, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, we've lots of different entities in the current electricity market that we have. A lot of the cost of electricity is going to things like electricity retail, it's going to bank service providers, it's going to electricity retailers. So if we have an automated solution that can remove some of that, obviously minus the cost of setting up that infrastructure, possibly then we do have the saving for the customer. I suppose the other point to make on that as well, we're investing massively at the moment in Ireland in a smart metering infrastructure, whether or not we have peer-to-peer energy trading or blockchain-based decentralized energy market. So I think a lot of the questions around cost and a lot of the questions around security privacy also apply even if we're not.
Sure, I think that's well made. Yeah, Subhasis, it's just around the validation and the trust thing. So the guy who set up the blockchain originally, with the idea of the concept, was that he didn't understand why he needed an intermediary or a government or a central bank to validate it. So he said it's going to provide more trust. But one of the challenges that you said from blockchain is a trust challenge, right? Is it not self-defeatist? Like, does it provide more trust or does it take away trust?
Well, it is the requirement to evaluate your trust. You don't need any sort of another mechanism to evaluate your trust. So that's what the third party does, is they sort of guarantees that you can trust another unknown party. So blockchain will erase that requirement that you have to evaluate your trust first before interacting with them.
Okay, all right. I will come back to that. Maybe one for Morgan then. Whenever I hear, distributed ledger or blockchain, people talk about consensus mechanisms. How does it, is that what you're talking about, this form of consensus mechanism for, or is it a proof of stake that we're talking about? I know you're referring to proof of work, but can you explain how it would work in the energy sector in Ireland, in your opinion? Is it through a consensus mechanism?
In terms of how it might work in the energy sector, might pass on to some of the guys, but definitely the changes in the consensus mechanisms, the evolution of consensus mechanisms is starting to improve some issues and scalability. And obviously proof of work is very energy intensive, and it's, and you mentioned earlier about only 7 transactions per second. But as we move to more advanced consensus mechanisms, proof of stake and so on, you know, we're going to start seeing faster speeds that can eventually start to match the transaction speeds of the likes of MasterCard and some of the other more traditional transactional based systems that we have like Visa. Maybe you might want to add more maybe that compared to your energy.
Yeah, I suppose just to add to the point around trust. I mean, the way I see it is that blockchain or distributed ledgers, it's about putting trust in mathematics behind it, rather than putting trust in institutions. And I suppose then you kind of have this question. So if we go to something that's not a public blockchain and that's something more like a private blockchain, and so you still have a centralized entity in there, then what's the point of having blockchain? Why not just have a relational database? Or so that's a point that's raised a lot. But I think there still is a potential role for distributed ledger technology. Say, for example, if we have a centralized entity like the DSO, and the DSO has lots of constraints on the network because of these things are happening, and we have distributed users who are providing energy services to manage those constraints, you have a big problem around the validation of all those transactions and keeping a record of all of those transactions. So it would something like a private blockchain where the DSO would, for example, govern the permissions for people to transact, but all of the transactions and their verification will be carried out in the blockchain. So I think, and that's going to come back to the points that Subhasis and Morgan were making about scalability. So I suppose there are different solutions for different.
But are we not really just talking about then blockchain for private? Like this blockchain for business, it's, you know, it's a club where you're invited into it to join, and that's what leads to the efficiencies. Anything, a public blockchain might be just too inefficient. What's your view on that? Or Subhasis, what's your view on that?
Exactly. The sort of less you need to verify, faster it is, more scalable it is. So if you already have, you know, parties know each other, already there's some sort of trust between each other, then you need less verification, so to more scalable.
So that's how it works in the financial sector, because they all trust each other and there's more.
Yes, so basically that's why they use this hyperledger and we trade in a sense. So we trade now, I think it can have 10,000 transactions per second. Their sort of consensus model is completely different from Bitcoin or proof of work. They already assume that those banks knows each other and some level of trust on each other. So there is a lot of verification stages.
Really, every different use case may require just a different type of consensus mechanism depending on the challenges for that use case. I mean, proof of work seems to work fine for the Litecoin blockchain. It's relatively efficient, but you know it makes a lot more sense to have a proof of authority or a proof of stake when you've got a private-based blockchain. So.
Okay, let's just talk about business for a minute then, because the guys they're finding new research, it seems, all the time, but are you concerned coming from like a hardware provider, you know, interacting with a lot of businesses to develop energy solutions that like the Fortune 500 companies, the large companies are talking about more hacking in terms of their systems. Will this lead to, does it help hacking? Does it help combating hacking? Or what's your view on that?
See, the whole concept of the blockchain is about security. And I think so is not giving us a 100% solution, but we are there, like 99.9% we are there to safe with the technologies like blockchain or the distributed ledgers. So when you talk about the Fortune 500s, they have the enough money to spend on the new research, moving ahead with such technologies to provide different solutions. While at the same time for the smaller companies or the SMEs, the challenge is to go up with what's going on currently. So in that case, the technology like blockchain is proven for security. We can adopt that and grow on.
And maybe a question for yourself, but also Barry, because Barry mentioned it. You talked about smart contracts. So are you currently looking at smart contracts within your business?
Yes, we are looking for smart contracts, not only for the trading, but also for the security purposes. Like, let's say
You might explain how the smart contract works for your business.
Yeah, so for an example, it's a kind of a smart contract. Let's say you have a thermostat installed in your house, which is reliant on a temperature sensor. Now somebody come up and put the faulty sensor over there.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does, it will continue to boost your thermostat, which is loss in energy. So how we are looking for the smart contracts is that sensor, individual sensor, connect with your thermostat on a smart basis. That your thermostat know that the sensor you attached is certified one, is trusted one. So this is how we are dealing with the smart contracts at the moment within the sensor, on the machine to machine level.
Great, and you guys, are you looking at any smart contracting as from a research perspective or even from the policy perspective?
I suppose just to add to that, we're looking at a smart contract to verify peer-to-peer energy trades within the distribution grid, and that's what we're talking about in the energy and then EnerPort projects. But I suppose there are a number of other interesting projects out there in energy that are looking at smart contracts, for example, for the same thing at a transmission level. So we've had peer-to-peer trading at a transmission level for a long time. So say, for example, in a forward market, a generator would make an agreement with the large supplier, and they would go through traders and bank service providers to agree a certain amount of kilowatt hours to be sold before you go into the wholesale market. So that's too technical about it. But the regulators like this because it gives kind of stability to the market, with a certain part of the market that's assured. There's one company in Germany, I think, called Enerchain, so they're looking at smart contracts directly for that, so bilateral contracts at a transmission level. I know there are a lot of other people looking at smart contracts for renewable energy certificates, carbon certificates as well, because I suppose the traceability of these things gets more difficult as we go get more and more distributed.
Yeah, that's cited as a good example, really, in terms of, say, the ETS and verification of your certificate. That's something that can readily be applied to the Irish and the European market using that type of contract. And sorry, you wanted to come in more?
No. Okay, I was just going to say that the classic line of the smart contracts, neither smart nor the contracts, and I sometimes think of them as like a direct debit. They work fine. You agree to allow a certain amount of money to be taken out of your account on a monthly basis, and that's fine when it's the amount you intend to pay. But as soon as there's a dispute or something breaks down, and more money is taken out of your account than you expect to be taken, that's when it starts to get challenging. So I think just from a policy perspective, you were asking about it earlier. I think the area we're interested in is seeing how well trained maybe the legal profession is to deal with smart contracts when things start to go wrong, and then you actually have to go back into what the actual law is and how it should have worked, and who should be paid, untimely maybe, some of that stuff. Maybe great.
And in terms, so there's a big push at the moment in terms of prosumer, whether you're a commercial entity or a resident, and then there's a big push in policy terms for more community cooperatives for energy and energy trading at a local level and having equity models and all these things. Is there a role for blockchain in terms of enabling trading across renewable energy for consumers in Ireland as a way of meeting the obligations that are in the new energy plans? Any views?
I suppose the question was around so is there a role for blockchain in basically increasing the amount of renewable energy that we can?
Well, at the moment, there are generation pathways, right? So if you have a wind turbine in a wind park in Offaly, it goes into a generation path that goes straight up to Dublin or to Cork or wherever the urban centre is, and they utilise it. So in terms of the big push towards more community energy, is there a way for communities to be able to trade the energy that's developed in their own area and validate it using blockchain, becoming more secure using blockchain and enable the financial transactions?
Yeah, I suppose in theory there is a role for that, because in theory we can integrate more renewable energy if we were able to carry out the energy balance more locally. We cut down on transmission distance, which is supposed to have benefits for the grid. And then in the long term, can we actually cut down on the amount of infrastructure that we need to invest in, because we're balancing the energy locally. So there's possibly a role for that. I mean, I suppose I think what we'll see over the next few years is that we'll see a lot of these applications will become clear, in terms, a lot of these demonstrations will actually see, at the moment we're kind of talking about blockchains for everything, but I think we'll see a lot of projects and startups possibly slip away quietly, but I think there will be real applications that will work.
Before we go, sorry.
As an industry, we also think that they're going to be a big change within the 5 years in the blockchain. So that's why we are moving a lot of research and investment to developing products around the blockchain, which can be useful for an ecosystem revolving around the blockchain.
Yeah, so just before we open it up to the audience, a lot of it is about how you would derive value, and from what I read, at least, is it a technical challenge or is it a cognitive challenge? Do we just need to change the way we do things, or is it a regulatory challenge that we have, or where is the challenge? How can you deploy more of this type of technology within the energy sector in Ireland, and what needs to change? To me, I don't think it's technical. I think it's a regulatory challenge, and we just need to change the way we do things, do them differently.
I suppose I'll start and maybe give it to you guys to continue. For me, I think at the moment, I think the regulatory barrier is the biggest one. I think for us, this issue that we're talking about, being able to use network infrastructure to do peer-to-peer energy trading. I mean, if we carry out some peer-to-peer energy trades, is that going to bring down the entire grid? I don't think so. Because I think the regulatory barriers to doing some of this is possibly the biggest one at the minute. But there are technical challenges there as well. I think mainly around the IT infrastructure and having the communications infrastructure in place in particular to actually implement this. So I think regulatory is the biggest one, but there are technical ones there as well.
I'll just probably split two other barriers that we hear a lot when we chat to blockchain businesses. Is one, the technical expertise around blockchain technology. There's very few developers with the technical skills and programming language, for example, to actually to build these systems. And the second is probably around funding. Obviously, peer-to-peer energy networks are very expensive, especially if it's an Irish startup or an Irish company looking to build out their own peer-to-peer energy network. Where are they going to get that funding from? I think the US has economically huge amounts of venture capital and seed capital, so it's companies interested in the space, but it's just not as active a market here in Ireland.
Subhasis.
So I think the problems with blockchain in terms of scalability or privacy or security, these things can be solved, and it is being solved. We have new solutions on scalability, solve these things. The main challenge is developing the business model of why we should use blockchain for a trade. What are the roles of other entities in that business model, and also of course the regulatory side. So these two are the main problems. Technical problems can be solved with the blockchain.
And Gajendra, from your business side,
We think the blockchain literacy in the market. So most of people here understand about the blockchain, but a big audience does not know about the blockchain. So the literacy about the blockchain, and then the second thing will be the technology, not on the papers, academic papers, but on the physical thing.
and just before I pass over, because my centre is funded from government, there is a role from government, right? I know, Morgan, you said there's a lack of finance, not coming from the Department of Finance, but there's just a lack of finance. But what is the role? Is the role of government to support partnership or foster partnership across getting the skill set right within the universities and partnering them with industry? Or what do you think the role of government is in this context?
Well, when we set out, really, as I mentioned earlier, was just trying to provide as much clarity around aspects of the technology where there wasn't sufficient clarity. I think one thing that maybe government should be technology agnostic, so they shouldn't maybe pursue one technology, they should maybe set up a system which will allow for most geotechnologies to prosper. So I don't think that there's a roadmap for just targeting one technology specifically. But I mean, definitely, we're looking at the amount of venture capital that's available in Ireland, the amount of seed capital that's available in Ireland, seeing what can be done. And as I said, we're trying to bring as much carbon to the market as possible.
Sounds like the government should be investing more in energy R&D. Is that what yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we'll open up now just for 5 more minutes because we're slightly over time, but if anyone has any questions that they wish to raise or comments before there's some closing remarks from Piyush. Yes, if you wouldn't mind, I know you spoke before, but if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be great as well.
Thanks very much. Susan Ray from Nimbus CIT. So, you touched on it, Morgan picked up on it, the need for the IoT, ICT communications infrastructure. So is it likely we're going to end up with monopolies providing that infrastructure the same way we have single DSOs? So we're just going to end up with a blockchain operator monopoly? And are we kind of back with the same problem? Or, I mean, are we going to have such philanthropic rollout of this infrastructure to support peer-to-peer communities? Do you think it's realistic, or what's the time frame to have the ICT infrastructure to support communications layer that would be needed to operate these energy communities, considering we're still waiting for smart meters?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's over to you, Barry.
Sorry, Barry.
No, I think that's a very good question. I suppose what we're proposing, the idea is that we will have smart meter infrastructure in place, that obviously for some users, depending on the part of the country that you live in, you're also waiting for a broadband rollout. So we're depending on those to be in place. How it would work practically is that you as a user would need to install a home energy management system that can pull the information from the smart meter, and then you're using public internet as the main communications, and that's kind of way we're looking at it in terms of data privacy you'd opt in, because you'd see a benefit in being able to trade your energy or sell your energy. But yeah, I mean, at the moment we're installing our own open source monitoring systems because that infrastructure isn't there. But I suppose as regards the policy around having, I guess, a meter operator is a natural monopoly. I suppose around the policy of how you need to separate that and regulate that. I suppose maybe Morgan, is that your
I'd just like to say that ESPN being a core member of the IERC, it's not a bad thing that there's only one DSO. It's the advantage and the disadvantage. Are there any other questions?
I have one more. Sorry. So again, sorry, Barry, you touched on the data. So I suppose blockchain gives you back a certain element of data ownership, but if you're opting into energy services, are you giving up ownership of that data? And is it the energy service provider then owns your data and they have the opportunity to monetize it?
Anyone can answer this question. So maybe Subhasis, do you want to try? Here we go. I don't mean try in a...
Well, I think it will depend on how you are going to design the blockchain itself. So one of the models we are looking into is to use sort of multiple blockchain, where one blockchain basically supports one community. So you don't necessarily share your data outside your community. That's one possible solution of what you're talking about. So you use multiple blockchains and you have some sort of cross-blockchain functionality with privacy preserving cross-blockchain sort of data transfer functionality, so that you don't share your data with outside your community.
Yes, if you just want to introduce yourself, Mike's on.
My name is Gavin. I am a startup that deals with community waste in community and managing waste. I was wondering, are there existing communities that you look at that are suitable for that infrastructure already?
Not yet, no.
Well, I suppose we're,
You can talk about it.
I guess we're looking to, we're applying for funding for the next version of this project, and as part of that, we've got letters of support from the Tallaght Smart Grid community, and also the Inisheer on the Aran Islands are quite interested in this because they've got a lot of money from SEI basically, and they have a lot of heat pumps, PVs, and some battery storage, and again their use of that is not very efficient, so they're very interested in it. So we're hoping to be able to use them as a community, as one of the test beds. But that's the next step, is to actually have a full scale trial.
Yeah, there's a number of community cooperatives that have established, some of them out of the Better Energy Scheme run by SEAI, and some of them just naturally within communities. In Clonakilty, in Claremorris, in the Aran Islands, in Tallaght. We're working with the community of Tallaght, with the local authority in Tallaght, and a number of different companies as well, to test some technologies, peer-to-peer trading on a microgrid within the Tallaght area. So it's a nice segue into some advertising for other projects, thanks for that. But there are a number of different cooperatives in existence. Some of them, of course, Crest in Tipperary as well. It would be one of the stronger ones linked to the Energy Agency.
But they are energy communities, but they wouldn't be. They wouldn't have addressed privacy issues for. It's not a network. I don't know.
No, it's to the point that it's not a network in a kind of hardwired kind of perspective. Is that what you mean? Yeah. So
each person is identified, and the privacy is retained within the community. The data is retained within the community.
No, I believe that they're preparing themselves so they can trial everything from smart metering to local storage to, so say for example the community of Dingle. So ESB are focusing on making Dingle the peninsula a smart community. So they're another project that we're working on that in terms of rolling out storage and the interaction between storage and the residential and the local area network. So that is where the local community actors would be connected and would be able to share and trade information between each other. But you're right, it involves another pilot or another demonstration project, but you need to have an active community who are willing for that type of technology deployed in their area, and that involves capacity building and engagement as well as just the hardware and software requirements. Okay, I think this session has come to an end. I'd like to thank all the speakers and the presenters, and I'll pass you over to Piyush. Thanks. Maybe around.
And in great form, Piyush delegates the task to me. So let's see, how's that going to work? Right. So thank you everybody for being here. I just want to say a couple of thank yous. So again, thank you to the panel very much, and to Matt for hosting the panel. Really good questions, and thank you for kicking that off with a great overview. So mostly thank you to you for being here, taking out your event, running through your dinner hour, and I hope the cookies were probably just a good start for you anyway. I also want to give my sincere thanks to the speakers, but also to Carlos and Owen for helping set up and helping with the microphones, and to Maria, our center administrator, for that, and to Brian for helping us with the YouTube and getting us out on the web. So big round of applause to everybody. Thank you.